How did you make the decision to go ahead and take the role of Judy?
Well, Irwin called me every day for 2 weeks. And I married very young, a psychologist, and who was a bit older than I, and he was upset that I didn't want to do it.
The woman who played Judy Robinson spent decades trying to escape the shadow of Lost in Space. And at 81, Marta Kristen is finally talking about why. Behind the colorful sets, futuristic gadgets, and family-friendly adventures was a production filled with tensions, disappearing dialogue, and changes that slowly transformed the show into something its cast barely recognized. Kristen saw that evolution firsthand, and some of what she remembers paints a very different picture of the series fans grew up loving. What really happened when the cameras stopped rolling? And why did the role that made Marta Kristen famous become something she spent years trying to leave behind? Join us as Marta Kristen finally confirms what happened on the Lost in Space set. The road to Jupiter. Marta Kristen's very existence was complicated from the start. She was born in 1945 while World War II was still raging across Europe, to a Finnish mother and an enemy German soldier in a country still under Nazi occupation. Her mother, Helmi Ruusinen, had been forced to work for a German officer and hid her pregnancy out of fear for her life. In a small room in Nazi-occupied Norway, Birgit entered a world that was already beginning to collapse around her. To protect her infant daughter from the Lebensborn program, a Nazi initiative designed to take racially pure children from their mothers and raise them in state-run facilities, Helmi made the heartbreaking decision to put her 2-month-old baby in an orphanage. For 4 years, Birgit remained in that Norwegian orphanage, but in 1949, Professor Harold Oliver Soderquist, an educator at Wayne University in Detroit, and his wife Bertha arrived at the orphanage seeking a child to adopt. They chose Birgit, renamed her Martha Anneliese Soderquist, and brought her to America. The Soderquists were intellectuals, educators who valued learning above all else, and their household was a world away from the subterranean orphanage, where Marta had spent her earliest years. She arrived in New York, according to her adoptive mother's recollection, walking off the plane like Charlie Chaplin, a 4-year-old girl already performing, already understanding that movement and expression were the languages of survival. The Soderquist family eventually moved to Santa Monica, California. Marta, now a teenager, found herself in the sunny, beachside world of post-war California, a world completely different from the gray Norwegian orphanage she had known. She attended Santa Monica High School and later the Hollywood Professional School, focusing on the performing arts that had always come naturally to her. At 15, Marta was eating lunch in a Santa Monica restaurant when producer-director James B. Harris spotted her. Harris had produced Stanley Kubrick's Lolita, and he had an eye for talent. He arranged for her to get a Hollywood agent, opening doors that would lead to a rapid series of television roles. Marta's early 1960s credits came quickly. She appeared on The Loretta Young Show, Leave It to Beaver, and My Three Sons. She also guest-starred in a 1961 episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, called Bang, You're Dead. In that episode, she shared the screen with a young actor named Billy Mumy, the same Billy Mumy who would later play her on-screen brother, Will Robinson, in Lost in Space. Then her breakthrough came in 1965, when she was cast as Lorelei, the mermaid, in the beach party film Beach Blanket Bingo, starring Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon. The role required her to spend hours in freezing ocean water. It was grueling, but the performance caught the eye of Irwin Allen, a master television producer casting a new science fiction pilot titled No Place to Hide. Allen saw in Marta the perfect actress to play Judy Robinson, the eldest daughter of a family lost in space. But Marta hesitated. She had trained in the Meisner and method acting techniques at the Actors Studio. She dreamed of moving to New York and pursuing serious theater work. Television, she feared, would typecast her forever. Irwin Allen pursued her for 2 full weeks, refusing to take no for an answer. Eventually, her first husband, a psychologist she had married in 1963, convinced her to sign the contract. Against her instincts, Marta agreed. She had no idea that this decision would change the course of her life forever. The face of futuristic glamour. When Lost in Space premiered in 1965, Marta Kristen's Judy Robinson was unlike any female character in science fiction before her. She was not the screaming damsel in distress that audiences expected. Marta brought her Actors Studio training to the role, portraying Judy as a young woman with inner strength. She played Judy as someone who might quote Shakespeare while exploring the galaxy. This was method acting applied to a space opera. Her favorite episode was Attack of the Monster Plants from the first season. In this episode, her character is duplicated by alien pod creatures, creating an evil double who tries to sabotage the family. Marta loved playing the sinister, complex version of Judy. The dual role allowed her to stretch her acting muscles and demonstrate a range that the show's camp direction otherwise suppressed. It reminded her and the audience of what she was truly capable of. The costumes, however, were a nightmare. Paul Zastupnevich designed the show's futuristic wardrobe. Marta's Season 1 silver foil flight suit was almost completely unbreathable. Under the intense studio lights at 20th Century Fox, she would overheat dangerously. The stiff, metallic materials offered no ventilation. She sweated profusely while trying to deliver her lines calmly. The culottes she wore in the first season were particularly uncomfortable and unflattering. But Marta endured these hardships throughout Season 1 without complaint. She understood that the show's visual style was essential to its appeal. But in Seasons 2 and 3, the show switched to color broadcasting, and Marta's wardrobe changed dramatically. Out went the silver foil and culottes. In came Paul's bold, mod-inspired designs, color-blocked mini dresses, knee-high vinyl boots, and vibrant geometric patterns. These costumes reflected the youthquake of the 1960s, the same Carnaby Street energy that was revolutionizing fashion in London and New York. The teen magazine phenomenon was overwhelming, and that was the true beginning of Marta's fame. Marta's face appeared constantly in Tiger Beat and 16 magazine, and every week she received thousands of letters, mostly from young girls asking for her hair, makeup, and style secrets. Within the Robinson family, Judy played an important role. She bridged the gap between the parental authority of Guy Williams and June Lockhart, and the childlike innocence of Penny and Will. Judy was old enough to understand the stakes of the family's predicament, but young enough to still embody hope. Marta played this role with intelligence, never letting Judy become just the older sister. She gave Judy a maturity that made her the emotional anchor of the family. But how long could that success really last? Sidelined by camp. It didn't take long for the show's original premise as a serious family survival drama to fall apart. The first season had presented the Robinsons as a family struggling against the cosmos. But ABC's Batman was a massive hit, and its campy, self-aware humor changed television forever. Network executives demanded that Irwin Allen inject the same energy into Lost in Space. Irwin, ever the pragmatist, complied enthusiastically. The show that had begun as thoughtful science fiction devolved into an absurdist comedy with talking vegetables and increasingly ridiculous monsters. While this transformation was underway, another person saw an opportunity: Jonathan Harris. Jonathan had been hired to play Dr. Zachary Smith, a temporary villain who would appear in only a handful of episodes. But he was a theatrical veteran with a genius for self-promotion. He began rewriting his own dialogue, adding theatrical flourishes and campy overacting. He befriended the writers and gradually shifted the focus of each episode away from the Robinson family and onto Dr. Smith, Will Robinson, and the robot. Harris understood that the new camp direction rewarded larger-than-life characters, and he made himself the largest of them all. For Marta, a trained actress who had studied seriously for years, watching her dialogue disappear was devastating. Her lines were systematically cut to make room for Harris's increasingly lengthy monologues. The low point came in the 1966 episode The Sky Pirate, guest starring Albert Salmi. In that episode, Judy Robinson had exactly one word of dialogue: goodbye. It was incredibly humiliating, and nothing like the future she dreamt of. The scripts grew increasingly absurd. Marta had trained at the Actors Studio, studying the meticulous techniques of Meisner and method acting. She had prepared herself for serious dramatic work. Instead, she found herself filming scenes where she was forced to battle giant, talking space vegetables. Marta tried to stay calm about it, but she wasn't entirely passive. In the episode Space Princess, she fought Irwin Allen to showcase her real singing voice. She performed a Beach Boys track, insisting that her character demonstrate actual talent. It was a small victory, but a significant one, and that episode became one of the few bright spots in her frustrating tenure. Throughout this period, Marta remained bound by her contract and studio demands. Despite Irwin Allen's promises about leading storylines, she was forced to stay quiet. The studio executives who controlled the show were terrified of disrupting the booming merchandising profits. Action figures, lunch boxes, and coloring books all featured Dr. Smith, Will, and the robot. But the family dynamic that Marta represented was less marketable, and so she was sidelined. And as Marta watched her role disappear, she'd realize she wasn't the only one feeling the strain. A family of rivals. But even with all the frustrations happening on the Lost in Space set, Marta found a lifeline in her friendship with Mark Goddard, who played Major Don West. On the show, there was a romantic subplot between Judy and Don that the writers had eventually abandoned. But off-screen, Marta and Mark formed a deep platonic alliance. Both were serious actors who had expected to play meaningful roles in a serious drama. Both were increasingly marginalized as the show devolved into camp. Their shared disappointment bonded them in a way that no on-screen romance could have. During breaks in filming, Marta and Mark would hide out on the Fox backlot, smoking cigarettes and venting their rage. They railed against the writers, against Jonathan Harris's scene stealing, against Irwin Allen for allowing the show to become absurd. The bond they forged in those smoke-filled conversations would endure for decades, outlasting the show itself and becoming one of the defining relationships of Marta's life. The atmosphere on set wasn't always friendly. There was a silent yet intense friction that had developed between the older classical actors and the camp stars who had hijacked the show. Guy Williams, who played Professor John Robinson, had been a massive star from Disney's Zorro. As Jonathan Harris systematically stole Guy's leading man status, Guy became deeply bitter. The tension between the two actors was a cold war that Marta navigated carefully every day. She respected Williams and understood his frustration. He, like her, had signed on to play a serious character, only to watch his role diminish. But she also had to work with Harris. Walking this tightrope required all of Marta's diplomatic skills. But time proved to be the great healer. Decades later, the surviving cast united for a famous 1983 Family Feud charity special. The petty grievances and professional jealousies faded into insignificance. Instead, they shared an appreciation for the unique experience they had all survived. Marta, who had once resented the show, came to recognize that Lost in Space had given her something irreplaceable. A family, however dysfunctional, that would endure for the rest of her life. And just when things looked like they couldn't get worse on set, what happened next would change everything. The sudden blackout. When Lost in Space came to an end, no one saw it coming. The cast had expected a renewal, and sets for the new season were already being drafted. But in March 1968, the cast learned there would be no fourth season. The real reason was corporate politics, not ratings. CBS network executive William Paley personally disliked the show's campy direction. When producer Irwin Allen failed to submit Season 4 plot outlines on time and missed budget deadlines, Paley seized the opportunity to cancel the show. How did this affect Marta? One would think she'd start getting called for multiple gigs, but that wasn't the case. Instead, she got typecast. Because Marta was so identified with Judy Robinson, serious film directors refused to audition her for dramatic features. She was the space girl, and in the minds of Hollywood's gatekeepers, that was all she could ever be. To break this image, Marta moved to gritty, low-budget indie films. Her most significant role came in 1973, when she starred as Lee Phillips in the cult exploitation thriller Terminal Island, directed by Stephanie Rothman. The film also featured a young, unknown Tom Selleck. It was about a dystopian future where murderers were dumped on an island to fend for themselves. Marta's character was tough, hardened, and a far cry from wholesome Judy Robinson. The role allowed her to demonstrate a range that the Lost in Space scripts had never permitted. She continued her indie run with other experimental films. In 1973, she appeared in the avant-garde feature Once, a film with no dialogue that required her to perform entirely through pantomime. In 1975, she starred in Gemini Affair, a psychological drama that explored Hollywood's dark underbelly. Financially, however, these indie films couldn't support her. Following her 1973 divorce and the birth of her daughter, Laura, Marta Kristen needed a steady income. So she moved to Madison Avenue, becoming one of the most successful commercial actresses of the 1970s. She appeared in over 40 national television campaigns for major brands, including Clairol. The work wasn't fulfilling, but it paid the bills and allowed her to raise her daughter with stability. By the time Marta returned to mainstream television in the late 1970s and 1980s, she was a high-demand guest star. She appeared on Mannix, Remington Steele, Scarecrow and Mrs. King, and Fame. These guest appearances kept her in the public eye, reminding audiences she was still a working actress. Each role was a small victory, a demonstration that typecasting could be overcome through persistence. Marta had survived the cancellation, navigated the treacherous waters of post-television Hollywood, and emerged as a resilient, adaptable performer who refused to be defined by her most famous role. But could Marta ever escape the shadow of Judy Robinson? The return to the cosmos. The mid-1990s marked a turning point in Marta's relationship with her sci-fi past. For years, she had run away from Judy Robinson, resenting the character for the creative limitations she had imposed. But as the decades passed, she began to recognize the role's profound global impact. Lost in Space had been syndicated worldwide, reaching generations of viewers who had grown up with Judy Robinson as a childhood hero. The show had inspired countless scientists, engineers, and dreamers. Marta began attending international Comic-Con circuits, meeting the fans who had kept the show alive for 3 decades. Those conventions also helped financially. Selling autographs and interacting with global fans provided her with steady economic stability. The money allowed her to live comfortably, free from the financial anxieties of the 1970s. More importantly, the conventions gave her a sense of purpose. She was part of something larger than herself, a community of fans who had made Judy Robinson an enduring part of popular culture. The full circle return came in 1998, when Warner Brothers released a big-budget feature film remake of Lost in Space. Marta was cast in a cameo role as Reporter 1, appearing alongside her former co-stars June Lockhart and Angela Cartwright, who also made cameos. The role was small, but its significance was immense. Marta was returning to the universe that had made her famous, reclaiming her place in the franchise she had once resented. In the years that followed, Marta became the franchise's historical archivist. After Guy Williams died in 1989 and Jonathan Harris died in 2002, Marta recognized that the surviving cast members were the only ones who could preserve the show's legacy. She participated in documentaries, DVD commentary tracks, and retrospectives, sharing her memories and ensuring that her departed colleagues were not forgotten. In 2017, Marta faced a devastating loss. A catastrophic California wildfire completely incinerated her home, destroying all her worldly possessions. Among the losses was the nearly completed manuscript of her tell-all memoir, representing years of reflection and writing. The fire consumed photographs, memorabilia, and mementos from her decades in Hollywood. She was left with nothing but the clothes on her back and the memories in her head. Despite losing her home, Marta refused to be defeated. In the years leading up to the massive Lost in Space 60th anniversary celebrations, she continued to travel the world, attending conventions, meeting fans, and celebrating the show's enduring legacy. The woman who had lost everything demonstrated a resilience equal to anything she had ever portrayed on screen. She was not merely surviving, she was thriving. A testament to the indomitable spirit that had carried her from an underground orphanage in Oslo to the heights of Hollywood stardom. Today, Marta Kristen is dedicated to reconstructing her world in Venice, California. Now in her 8th decade, she keeps trying to meticulously recreate her lost memoir, accepting select cinematic opportunities such as Ralph's Perfect Christmas, and providing a sanctuary for her 2 rescued dogs. After everything she endured on Lost in Space, was Judy Robinson ultimately the role that held Marta Kristen back? Or the one that gave her a legacy she could never have built anywhere else? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.